And good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings here on Now TV. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and I really appreciate you being with me. We are continuing our study of the challenge of Christ. Remember, Jesus said, "If I do not do the works which my Father has given me, do not believe me." How seriously do you take that challenge? I've got to tell you a real quick anecdote here. For some years, I had a booth at the Abilene Christian University lectureship. And normally during that period of time, for many years, my good friend William Bell helped me man the booth. Other people helped me from time to time, but William was the main guy. And we would talk to them and we would simply ask them a real simple question. Can God tell time? Now, I've written a book by that very name. It's available on my website. And I want to tell you, that book has gone through 5 printings. It has influenced and changed the lives of thousands upon thousands of people. So anyway, we would ask these people, and by the way, the great majority of people who attended that lectureship, Abilene Christian University lecture, which is held every year, are ministers, they are deacons, they're elders, they're church leaders. And when we would ask them this question about can God tell time, they would kind of look at us and wonder, what are you talking about? Of course he can tell time. When we would share with them the challenge of Christ, if I do not do the works which my Father has given me, do not believe me. And then we would show them Jesus's predictions that he was coming back in the first century in the judgment of all men. You simply, literally would not believe the responses we got. I can't tell you the number of advanced theological students getting their masters, working toward their doctorates. They would read the verses and they would literally go, I had no idea that was in there. Why didn't I know that? And on and on, similar comments. You see, ladies and gentlemen, this is really serious. When modern day Christians are not aware of the challenges that we are facing, then every one of those Christians that is unaware of the challenge of Christ, that is unaware of the militancy of Jews, Muslims, atheists, agnostics, they are setting themselves up to be attacked and to be unable to defend their faith. Contrary to what Peter said in 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 15, sanctify Christ as Lord in your heart and be ready always to give an answer to every man who asks you a reason for the hope that is within you. Now, the word answer there is from the Greek word apologia. And it's from the word, or it is the word from which we get our word apology. Well, you see, apology to you and me today has a different meaning than it did in the first century. For you and me today, when we offer an apology, we've done something wrong, we got caught at it, embarrassed by it, and we say, I'm awfully sorry that I did that. That is not the meaning of apologia in the first century. Apologia in the first century means a reasoned, orderly, logical defense of what we believe. And so, when we are confronted today with atheists, or by atheists, as I recently was in my formal debate with Mark Smith, the atheist, a former Christian turned atheist, if we are not prepared to meet that challenge, we are going to find ourselves at a loss. Another very quick anecdote before I move on. Many years ago, as I was a pulpit minister for a large congregation, one of our members, very wonderful Christian lady, she started attending a college. not far from us. She came up to me one Sunday morning and she was just almost in tears. She said, Don, my science teacher had us say, how many of you are Christians? Well, we raised our hand. And he said, you are ignorant. You are fools. I'm going to destroy your faith in this class. She said, Don, he has no right to do that. And I said, well, welcome to the modern world. This is the world of the hatred of Christianity. And she literally had no defense for any of the things that he said. She would come to me and I would give her some evidence, some responses, and it strengthened her faith incredibly. But I say all of that to bring us back to the reality of the importance of the challenge of Christ. It is amazingly, I got to use this word, and I hope it doesn't sound too harsh, but it is amazingly ignorant when people today say that the challenge of Christ does not apply today. Do you mean to tell me that Christians should not be able to prove the reality of Jesus Christ, the historicity of the Bible, the inspiration of the Bible, the applicability of the Bible today? Folks, this is the challenge of Christ. And yet, there are certain individuals that basically stalk me on Facebook and on YouTube saying, oh, the challenge of Christ doesn't apply to us. That only applied to the people that Jesus was talking to in the first century. That's one of the most ridiculous, unlearned, and again, ignorant comments that anyone could possibly make. And so, that's why I've spent over 2 years sharing with you how to answer the challenge of Christ. Everyone wants to go to Revelation. Talk about Revelation. There's a plethora of new books out. Why the book of Revelation is for us today. Now, can we learn from Revelation? Absolutely. Are its eschatological predictions for us today? No, they are not. How do I know that? Because the Father, who knew the day and the hour of the coming of the Lord, the judgment, the end of the age, told John that the revelation of Jesus Christ was, these things must shortly come to pass, the time, the kairos, the divinely appointed time has arrived. And I've shared with you that the Old Testament over and over and over set the divinely appointed time for certain things to happen, for the kingdom to be established, for the coming of the Lord, for the judgment, for the full arrival of the kingdom of God. And that the New Testament writers, not only John in Revelation, but the New Testament writers, and even Jesus himself, said that divinely appointed time had arrived. Remember, we've been focusing on Daniel chapter 9. 70 weeks are determined, that means cut out. Here's the flow of time. God looked down through the stream of time and said, 70 weeks, basically 490 years, from here to here is cut out. It's determined. It's divinely appointed for the following things to take place. Over the last 2 videos, I've been sharing with you the third constituent element of Daniel chapter 9 and verse 24. 70 weeks are determined to finish the transgression. Now, this is absolutely incredible. It really doesn't matter on one level. If you take the early dating of the book of Daniel, that is, the return of the children of Jerusalem in approximately 539, BC. Daniel writing immediately before the destruction of Babylon at the hands of the Medes and the Persians. Pardon me. Just think about how remarkable it is that Daniel was able to predict the events that took place in the first century. Only God knows the future. Or, if you want to take the late date of the book of Daniel and say that Daniel was written during the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, I've already shared with you, that's not tenable, that's not defensible, it's simply unhistorical. But of course, the liberal scholars say, well, Daniel was writing post-eventu, ex-eventu, writing after the events of the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, writing in the form of prophecy. Now, why do they tell us it was written after the fact? Writing the book as if it was prophecy? Well, they tell us that because, point number one, they do not believe in anything in the reality of actual prophecy. So they just have this guy who is not Daniel. He just tells us he's Daniel because that was a highly respected name in Israel. So he has this fake, this fraud, write this book after the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, write it in the form of a prophecy, and the way that we know that he wrote true prophecy is because he said some things that failed. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, the presuppositional approach to biblical prophecy is false. To assume that there could not be genuine prophecy because there's not genuine prophecy today is a logical fallacy. It's what I call theological uniformitarianism. What is true now has always been true. And that's not true. So anyway, I've got to move on here. But the fact is, if you allow that Daniel was written during the time of Antiochus Epiphanes and actually, literally did prophesy of things to come, think about how remarkable and amazing that is. So what was Daniel predicting? 70 weeks are determined to finish the transgression. I've shared with you that term means to fill up the measure of sin. And I've shared with you that cannot be referring to the time of Antiochus Epiphanes in its full application. Why? Now, number one, let's remember, Israel did fill up the measure of their sin in the 2nd century BC. I don't have a problem with that. That's what Daniel 8:23 and following teaches. That is not what Daniel 9 is predicting. Because the filling up of the measure of Israel's sin, I'm using the word Israel in its fullest, most comprehensive sense here. Technically, Judah, Jerusalem, and the 2 southern tribes. The reason that it's not talking about the time of Antiochus Epiphanes in its ultimate application is because the filling up of the measure of sin in Daniel chapter 9 would result in the judgment of Israel that would bring in the new heaven and new earth, as we shall see. Well, guess what, folks? The new heaven and new earth didn't come at the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. Now, atheists tell us, well, see, that's just another example of a failed prophecy. No, it's not. It's the failure, the utter failure, or the utter refusal of atheists to understand biblical covenant language. They're either ignorant of it or they reject it. Well, if they reject it, that's their problem. If they're ignorant of it, that's their problem. But either way, they're wrong. So, that time of the filling up of the measure of sin on the part of Judah and Jerusalem goes beyond the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. It is eschatological. I've been sharing with you that in Jesus' ministry, the concept of filling up the measure of sin is a dominant, and I'm talking a dominant concept, motif, and thing. Matter of fact, I have said this on many occasions. And by the way, I offer a book in my bookstore that is written by my friend Sam Dawson, and it's on the book of Revelation. And it's about martyr vindication from Genesis to Revelation. Sam Dawson is one of the few Bible students that understands, comprehends, and appreciates how comprehensive, how utterly saturated the Bible is with the theme of martyr vindication. Now, you can go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, and go to the store and just look up the books by Sam Dawson. He's a great writer, great Bible student. Order the book on the fulfillment of Revelation. Send me a note that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping. That will save you $5. Now, to illustrate, last week I introduced Matthew 21 and Jesus' story of a vineyard, that the owner of the vineyard let out to workers, and they took care of the vineyard until the time of the harvest. At the time of the harvest, he sent out his servants to gather the time of the harvest from the vineyard keepers. Those vineyard keepers, those laborers, beat those servants and cast them out. The master sent more servants. They were beaten. They were cast out. Finally, the master says, I will send my son. Surely they will reverence him. But when these wicked servants, wicked husbandmen as they are called, realized that it was the son, they beat him and they killed him, saying among themselves, here's the son. Let us kill him and take the inheritance for ourselves. Pardon me. Now, Jesus was standing in front of a hostile audience of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the lawyers, the scribes, the leaders of Israel, the top scholars of the day. I have had a guy literally verbally attack me over the last several weeks, saying, Don, you have to bring your thinking into alignment with the ancient Jews. They knew the Hebrew and you don't. If you do not agree with them, then you are wrong. And I've been pointing out, well, here's the problem. The ancient Jews rejected Jesus. The ancient Jews said, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? The ancient Jews, the Jews of Jesus' day, called him a charlatan, a fake, a false Messiah. They rejected him and killed him. So I've asked this individual, okay, so you say that I have to agree with the ancient Jews, but the ancient Jews rejected Jesus and killed him. Do you agree that they were right? He refuses to answer. No wonder. Absolutely no wonder. Look, folks, just because the Jews of Jesus' day were the greatest Hebraic theologians of the time, obviously doesn't mean they were right unless you want to agree with them that Jesus was a fake. Do you? Well, atheists believe that. Agnostics believe that. Muslims believe that. Jews believe that. So you got all of these, quote, scholars, unquote, who say Jesus was wrong. Jesus was a liar. And I want to tell you, there are tons and tons and tons of PhDs out there who take that position. Have you ever heard of Bert Ehrman? Top skeptic of the day. He rejects Jesus. Now he believes Jesus existed. He just doesn't believe he's the Son of God. Doesn't believe he's the Savior of the world. Doesn't really know if he was raised from the dead or not. And he most assuredly believes, he's just recently published a book on the real meaning of Armageddon. And obviously, Jesus and the New Testament writers were wrong. Well, to continue, Jesus was surrounded by these top scholars of the day. When he told his parable, he asked them, "What will the master of that vineyard do?" Notice, when he comes. Oh, wait a minute. When he does what? And it's from the Greek word erchomai. It's a verbal form. Different forms of it are elthi, used in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. What will the master of that vineyard do when he comes? Ladies and gentlemen, here is Jesus teaching unequivocally that he was going to come. He's the master of the vineyard, isn't he? Or at the very least, his Father is the master of the vineyard who sent the Son who was killed. Here is a prophecy of the day of the Lord. Here is a prediction of the coming of the Lord. Why? Because those great scholars, those great, wonderful Hebraic students would fill up the measure of their sin. What Daniel predicts, 70 weeks are determined to finish the transgression. Now, anyone who's done any calculations knows and understands that the 490 years of Daniel chapter 9 brings us down to the time of Jesus, brings us down to the 1st century. Just exactly like Daniel chapter 2 in its delineation of 4 kingdoms, beginning with Babylon, Medo-Persian, Greek, and Roman. That kingdom countdown brings us to the days of the 1st century, the days of Rome. Exactly like Daniel chapter 7 that I've shared with you repeatedly. 4 beasts representing 4 kingdoms, beginning with Babylon, Medo-Persian, Greek, Roman. And in the days of that 4th beast, a little horn would arise, and he would persecute the saints. He would tread down the saints until the coming of the Son of Man as the Ancient of Days. That's how some older manuscripts render that. Even N.T. Wright takes note of that. And the little horn would be destroyed. Now, wait a minute. You got to catch the power of this. When would the little horn be destroyed? Well, you and I are told, we're waiting on the man of sin. Hal Lindsey told us back in the 1980s, the man of sin is alive somewhere in Europe today. 40 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. 1980s, countdown to Armageddon. No, it wasn't. When are we going to wake up? Daniel 7 posit the appearance of the man of sin in the days of the 4th empire. What was the 4th empire? The days of Rome. Ladies and gentlemen, You got to catch the power of this. Rome was destroyed in 476 AD. Rome ceased to exist as a world empire in 476 AD. Rome does not exist today. It does not exist in the form of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, what's the point of all of this? Just like Daniel 2 brings us to the days of Rome, just like Daniel chapter 7 brings us to the days of Rome, the 70-week countdown brings us to the days of Rome to do what? To fill up the measure. And boy, you got to catch the power of this. This is not about Rome filling up the measure of her sin. Do you remember what Daniel was told? 70 weeks are determined upon your city and upon your people. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniel 9 has nothing to do with any Gentile persecution and any Gentiles filling up the measure of their sin. But what happens? Oh, well, we're told that, the book of Revelation was written during the days of Domitian, who persecuted the church. No, he didn't. Written during the days of Rome and Domitian, and it was the Domitianic persecution, the Roman persecution, that would finally fill up the measure of her sin, and judgment would fall. Or we are told, the beast in Revelation, that's the Roman Catholic Church. And in the last days, the Roman Catholic Church will fill up the measure of her sin, and God will come and destroy her. No, ladies and gentlemen, this is 70 weeks are determined upon your holy city and upon your people. It's about Israel, not the Gentiles. We must catch the power of this and come to grips with it. And I'm out of time. So I'll see you next week.